down a bit. I might turn it up for different things, but we'll see. Good afternoon, everyone. Danse. So this is Indigenous Games and Outdoor Activities to fulfill the PE requirements. This session is brought to you by the Alberta Regional Professional Development Consortium, ARPDC, and I am through the ERLC, so lots of acronyms, the Edmonton Regional Learning Consortium. And we are brought to you and funded by Alberta, Learn Alberta. Before we start, I'll do a land acknowledgement. So Tanse, I live on Treaty 7 land. I'm here in Calgary. It's the ancestral home of the Blackfoot people. There are also Dene settlements here, a treaty land, and Métis Nation number, well, it's actually Region 5 now. I haven't changed that. I need to. Just recently changed with our elections that I belong to, as well as the Manitoba Métis Federation. And all have contributed to the shaping of Alberta and Canada. I thank the Blackfoot for allowing me to live on their land and share this space. And if you want, you can put the treaty land you live on or the settlement area that you're close to, whatever you'd like, into the chat. Those of you who have attended many of my sessions, and I know there's a number of people that come to them regularly, bear with me. Need to let everyone else know who I am and give myself a little bit of a background so that you know why I do this work. First of all, my name is Tammy Johnson, and through ARPDC, we are now called Designers of Professional Learning, which is an apt title, as besides doing these online presentations, which have become predominant since COVID, which is a good thing because it has allowed teachers to access PD on a more regular basis, working on their very busy schedules. But it also shows that we do workshops, I've done whole day presentations and work with teachers in different capacities, as well as we work in different curriculum areas. Right now the focus is on new curriculum, so I'm not as involved in that other than infusing Indigenous ways of knowing into new curriculum. But yeah, I'm looking in the chat. Oh, so we've got Treaty 8. Yeah, so I know a lot of you are probably in Treaty 8, which is awesome. Welcome. I am what is L'Oreal called as Red River Métis, from what is historically known as the Red River Settlement. I won't get into the politics of that because that term was used after Upper Canada, Lower Canada, as the Canadian government absconded off with our prairie lands, which were Métis areas mainly, that we shared with our predominantly Cree and Ojibwe cousins. When we meet Indigenous people, generally the first two questions is what's your name and where are you from? And so I've given you my name. My mom was actually a Mowat, and there's McDonald's, Mackays, and Beaudries. The Beaudries are a Alberta family, or voyageurs, and but the rest of my family is mainly, as you can see, Highland and Orkney Scottish Métis. That's a picture of my great-grandpa there, the gentleman sitting on the bench by the rocks. It's James Mowat. In Fort Saskatchewan, there's a school named after him, James Mowat Elementary, and there's a park, Mowat Park. And then in Edmonton, there's James Mowat Trail. It's spelled with 2 T's, but like I said, doesn't matter. It was MOAD when they came to Canada, but the English at Hudson Bay Company did not understand that Mowat was MOAD with a Scottish or Acadian accent. Right beside that picture of him is a picture of his surviving 4 children. The middle boy is my grandpa Rosser when he was about 6 years old. So I think that picture is around 1916. That's his 2 brothers, Oliver and Stanley, and my great aunt Tassie. And I think that picture of my great grandpa was the late 1800s. So there's some pretty cool pictures to be able to have. I am originally from Selkirk, Manitoba. My family's from north of Winnipeg. However, I went to school in Winnipeg. My mom lived there a lot of the time. And I also became a teacher there in the same school division that I graduated from, Seven Oaks School Division. And I moved to Calgary nearly 30 years ago. But anybody from it's closely connected to their land, especially Indigenous peoples in Canada, that I will always call that home. Where the Red River is where I always feel the most at home. I've worked a lot in special education and also with Indigenous students, pretty much starting right from when I was teaching in 1988 in the core area of Winnipeg. I was the only Indigenous teacher in my school, which sounds crazy if people know about the Indigenous population in Winnipeg. However, there weren't a lot of Indigenous teachers at that time. And or there were not a lot that identified themselves, especially if they're Métis. I always knew that my family was, we just didn't talk about it a lot. My grandpa spoke Cree but didn't teach us. He jigged, he fiddled, he did all those things, so I saw them growing up, but nobody ever said to me, hey, you're Métis. It wasn't a thing that we really knew, that you just were who you were, right? But the reason I do this work is I started a couple of years ago doing a project with Gitaskanou Tribal Council and Ignite e-learning online to take the outreach program for the grades 7 to 9 at KTCA and indigenize it for their particular cultures, decolonize it, add land-based learning and the Cree language, and working in concert with their specialists who were amazing, and I learned so much from them. Especially I have to put a shout out for Jason Big Charles. He works with AirPDC now as well and does other contract work, but in the land-based learning area, was an amazing help for me in showing me a lot of things, particularly because he's Métis as well, but he's lived on a settlement his whole life and grown up more of a traditionally Cree person. So really helped me with a lot of the things that I didn't think of in regards to like trails and yeah, just more the First Nations twist on things, right? As opposed to the Métis, which is very important because that's who I was working with. They were very happy with what I did. The elders were very pleased with the lessons that I put together, and they were able to add their teachings in, and I was encouraged to continue this work. So my objective in doing this is to really particularly help non-Indigenous teachers to feel comfortable, to not be so concerned about appropriation. Obviously, it's always a concern, but to kind of have a better way of maneuvering that on a case-to-case basis, and understanding, how to show respect for Indigenous cultures. Like I always say, I am Métis. I do not cover every single, and Métis are different too, right? Across the prairies and wherever they live, where we live differently as well. So we have to go culture by culture. We have to go individual by individual. I always tell people, go local. It's always my response when somebody says, where should I look for this information? I always say, look to the people whose land you're living on now and, learn about those people. I'm kind of in a mindset to learn more about the Blackfoot people now because I live here in Calgary, and I know far more about Cree culture because I practice Cree spirituality, but I also, grew up in an area that was mainly Cree, and my cousins I have are Cree as well. So yeah, I just encourage people to always do that. Look to the people that are closest to you to learn from. So I'm going to show you, AirPDC does have some resources already that are already curated for you guys, First Nations, Métis, Inuit resources that have been created by Alberta educators, and they're already here. Probably the one you know the most about would be Empowering the Spirit. I always say this is an amazing site. I see it constantly when I'm doing research. It's on post-secondary websites for their education programs, or just in referring to Indigenous work that they may be doing, or it's on, across Alberta, but across Canada in different ways. I've seen it listed, but it's got great stuff on here. We've got foundational knowledge, leading the learning, classroom supports, and then there's information about the site and ongoing learning opportunities. In particular, I always point people to the Orange Shirt and Day and Beyond section. There's some really cool teaching tools on here. There's some really great posters for each division for, so let's say, sharing circles, right? Or Orange Shirt Day in different areas like that. And they're in color and they're simple and wonderful just to print off and put onto your wall. And so if you're looking for some quick things that, are specifically Alberta as well, it's always nice to have that instead of always having to search all over the country. And then we do have on here, you can find resources by focus. So we can go to focus and we can go to First Nations, Métis, Inuit. And as you can see, there's tons of different ways to search, so all kinds of stuff on here. And if you look, these are all of the things that are readily available on publications and things. And probably the ones you'd notice the most, I know that I always had in the schools I was working was Education is Our Buffalo was one we used a lot of. And Weaving Ways, of course, is another one, infusing Indigenous knowledge into curriculum. All of these are there. And I know that they're also, the French consortium is also working on making sure that, and it's a lot of work for them to do, but they're trying to make sure that all resources are available en français as well. It takes time, obviously. You can search by audience. You can search by level, and then you can search by type. So it's got a really good search engine as well. So I just wanted to point that out for you guys. Go back to the presentation. So on to specifics of what we're looking at today. Grab a drink. So the presentation overall, this is what we're looking at. So I'm going to look at those PE general outcomes and where we can fit this into that, that learning. We're going to look at Indigenous dance, because that is definitely one way to fit things in. Social customs and spirituality of Indigenous games. And I know that's one that always surprises people, but just to kind of fit that in, because I know lots of people use Indigenous games, but so they understand them. And then look at specific Indigenous games that you could include. And then land-based or outdoor activities that you can use, and Indigenous sport heroes. So there are those general outcomes, right, for PE. And the two that do not fit specifically are types of gymnastics, because that's not part of Indigenous culture. And then individual activities are really not a part of Indigenous ways of knowing and being, quite honestly. There's not a lot that are individual activities. There may be things that you learn to do as an individual, but they're always taught together in a group. There's not a whole lot that Indigenous people have done that are specific individual activities. So particularly in PE, most things are group things. So that's where we're looking at. We're looking at the dance, we're looking at the games, and then we're looking at the activities and alternative environments. So that to me are the three areas that this really fits into the curriculum. So if we look at first Indigenous dance, and just give you guys some background, is that and when I say Indigenous dance is spiritual, it's a prayer. That goes for just about everything that is done. So traditionally, and I'm speaking traditionally, so Indigenous practice, we talk about going into ceremony. And because, like I said, I'm Métis, but I practice Cree spirituality, and everything is a ceremony once it's entered into in that space. So if you've ever been to, let's say, a powwow, or if you've seen them online, you'll notice it takes place in a circle, first of all, generally, or at least an oval if it's in a bigger stadium area. That they're generally, not for every single culture, but generally there's a smudge is lit. There's definitely a prayer. There's songs that are sang that are ceremonial songs. And so when those things are done, even though if you're not Indigenous or you're not practicing those things, you may not recognize that you've entered into a ceremonial area. And so the dance itself is spiritual. It's a prayer. And when the dancer, let's say a jingle dancer or whomever is dancing, they're doing their dance, they're praying to their ancestors. They've said a prayer before they've gone out, so that it, this is something that will be beneficial to their entire community, and it's supposed to heal. So all of the dances are healing dances as well. So what are some different ways that you can, obviously, if you're teaching the kids, they're not necessarily going to do it like that, but it's a good idea for them to understand that, at least when they watch, and understand, especially the regalia that people are wearing is really important. The regalia itself is done individually, made by that person, and or their family has made it for them, generally. And as you know, a lot of it's beaded. It takes sometimes thousands of hours to complete these pieces. Sometimes they're handed down from one generation to another. So they may have belonged to an ancestor of yours that danced as well. So there's a lot that goes into it. And every piece that that person is wearing has meaning to them and their culture. So there's different things that you could do, right? You can invite local dancers from your area to show and teach dances to your students, for sure. And especially if you know people in your school that dance, that would be an amazing way to get them involved. Or if you know, like if they have cousins or siblings or parents that dance, that would be great. You can also have people attend, right, a powwow, round dances. And I know for big schools especially, that might be a stretch, but you could encourage people to. You don't have to be Indigenous to attend a powwow or a round dance. And a matter of fact, a round dance is a way for everybody to bring everyone together in the community, and it's a time to share, and it doesn't matter who you are or where you're from, you're joined into the dance. And in a powwow, there's times when there are community dance as well, right? You don't have to be Indigenous either to join. Everybody's asked to come down and dance. And you don't have to be knowing how to do a specific dance, but you just go down and dance with everybody. And then, of course, in Métis, we have jigging, right? So that's something that's easy to teach. And I would not say myself that jigging is done in a prayerful way. I would say this is a First Nations and Inuit thing generally. From Métis culture, it was more of a celebration, fun time to get together. There's also lots of videos online with Indigenous dances that you can get kids to watch. But I thought I'd just show you this one. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but just show you. I know this is an Alberta First Nation that started powwow dance classes. And I know here in Calgary, actually, there are some as well. So there may be people that you could get in contact with that actually teach this as well. And these are things that, you know, Indigenous people want to share. First Nations, Inuit, you know, Métis will share jigging. We want to share with people. We want you to know about our cultures, and we want you to, you know, learn about how this is done and how much care has gone into it. As a matter of fact, too, just because it was banned, like First Nations couldn't dance, particularly Métis, we had to hide as well once there was when the dark times came, when after Riel was murdered, you know. So these are things that are exciting to be able to do in public. You can see they're teaching the kids, right? And so this is who we are, right? Dancing and music is just like every other group of people. Culture is so integral to who you are as a people, right? So just go over some of the different kinds of dances for you, the main ones. So at powwow dances, there's different dances for the men and for the women. So traditionally, they did not dance together. So the male categories include the grass dance, which to me is my favorite. I love the grass dance because the men get really down low, and because literally they would dance with the grass. And they, I've read a couple of times, and I cannot verify this is completely true, but they used to say the grass dancers went first because on the prairies then, especially those tall grasses, even though they would cut some of them down, the grass dancers would wear down that area for the other dancers to be able to dance. So that's kind of cool as well. There's a traditional dancing, which you've probably seen, and that's really that warrior type dance, a protector dance. There's a fancy dance, which is super energetic and colorful. They've got their super bright regalia a lot of the time, which is really neat. And then the prairie chicken, which is showing that mating dance, the prairie chicken. You've probably seen hoop dancers, but those are not traditionally at powwow dances usually. So they might highlight them. They might bring in a hoop dancer to show or some, but that's not generally done at the powwow itself. And I do have a couple of links in here for you guys too. You can check them out with about powwow dances for the Canadian Encyclopedia, and then just in music and dance website as well. For the women, there's the main three. There's a traditional, again, and that's the one where you'll see the ladies usually holding eagle feathers in front of them, and they're kind of doing a step up and down around, and they do it very slowly, right? And especially the older ladies, you'll see the seniors a lot of time if you go to powwows, they will do that one as well, because that's one that's it's still a lot of work. It doesn't look like they're doing a lot, but they're just keep that still and look that graceful, even just to keep your body that straight and the balance and everything, and to keep moving. It can be quite tedious, like it's hard, right? And so a lot of the older ladies still do that just because it's a little bit slower, but it's very you'll notice it's very full of dignity, and it's about being respected and the grace and wisdom of the female. And then the fancy shawl, which for me, the women's dance, I love that one. Especially, I love it when the little kids come out, the little girls, and they come out with their shawls. They just look so cute when they're learning to dance. But it's about beauty and freedom, right? It used to be the younger ladies would do that, but anybody can do it now. And then the jingle dance, which is a healing dance. So they all are healing, but jingle particularly. And it's about, you know, that the circle of life and our connection with the natural world. So they each do have a meaning in particular, but you'd have to, you know, go a little bit more into that. Round dance. This is always a good one. I just thought I'd show you this video. It's fairly short, but just give you an idea a bit about the round dance.
What's kind of the meaning behind round dance? Like, what's the history of it? Dance is to bring people together, to heal, to acknowledge, to honor, to celebrate life in the fullest.
So it doesn't matter what culture you're from. One of the biggest things about the round dance is it breaks all those barriers that sometimes divide us. And one of those is like race and religion and all of those things that at times within our own lives divide us. This is the one time we come together and join hands and dance together throughout the whole night. So it absolutely doesn't matter what background you come from. We invite you. People always move in the same direction, and what does that represent?
Yeah, it represents how the earth travels around the sun, that movement, because we believe in that movement is about healing. So when you're moving in that direction, you're healing.
Is there any meaning behind the drums or certain like beat or pattern?
Beat is kind of like that of the heartbeat. We acknowledge the heartbeat of Mother Earth. So that's how it kind of sounds like a heartbeat.
I don't know how to dance. Is it okay to come and watch?
Yes, of course you can come and watch. There's also healing and watching as well. So let's get started. This is the round dance. You put your left hand up and your right hand down.
Right.
Your left leg represents the male, so you take a step to the left. Your right leg represents the female. How closely connected you are to the earth. You just slide your foot like that.
And then I've got just, so it is something you can do at your school. You can invite somebody if they drum and they could do that with your kids. They could show them how to do that. And then I just included this link for you as well. A little bit of more information about the round dance. And like I said, it's really awesome because it includes everybody and it's meant to include all different people. Right? And then Métis jigging. So I thought I would just show you a little bit of background, of course, because Métis jigging is interesting. There's lots of videos online as well to teach kids. So this is something you could include as well in PE class very easily. I love this little video because it really shows how the different cultures have melded together. And so I think that really helps as a Canadian, particularly to understand how, you know, different backgrounds of the people that predominantly European that came here first mixed in with Indigenous culture.
And music are powerful vehicles for storytelling. And what better way to explore the origins of Métis jigging and fiddle music than through performance? The Métis jig is a unique dance that combines the intricate footwork of First Nations dances with various Scottish, Irish, and French dance forms, all to the up-tempo rhythms of Métis fiddle music. The chicken dance originates with the Blackfoot people and is one of the oldest First Nations dances. The dancers imitate the movements of the prairie chicken, accompanied by the lively beat of a drum. Métis jigs include the quick, detailed step movements of many First Nations dances, including the chicken dance and the grass dance. One of the oldest Scottish Highland dances is the sword dance. It became tradition among Highland warriors and clansmen during the 15th century to celebrate victory in battle. There are many characteristics that the Scottish sword dance and the Métis sash dance have in common. However, it is the extra beats in the Métis sash dance that make it a faster moving dance. The French-Canadian style of dancing is unique to Quebec, but its roots can be traced back to Scotland and Ireland. The intricate footwork is often close to the floor, with the dancer's arms hanging loosely by their sides. This footwork, and some step dancing forms, can be seen in Métis jigs. Métis fiddle music and performance is influenced by Scottish, Irish, French, and First Nations traditions, resulting in a unique style. Vigorous foot tapping is believed to have originated as a replacement for First Nations and Celtic hand drumming. The fiddle is played with a focus on creating danceable rhythms, as Métis music has always been intended for social purposes and dancing. The most famous Métis dance is the Red River Jig, which combines Plains First Nations footwork with Scottish, Irish, and French Canadian dance forms. The Métis jig and the infinity symbol celebrate the story and the history of the Métis people. Métis music and dancing, like the interwoven threads of the sash, continues to reflect and strengthen the life force of the people who have faced adversity, risen above it, and joyously celebrate who they are every day.
Yeah, I like that video because I think it really encapsulates just, you know, like I said, that combination of cultures, right? In my family, I've got all those backgrounds as well. And so I think teaching kids about that, you know, you can also fit in a lot of history about our country and you know, in terms of what also, you know, the Métis people have learned from their First Nations cousins, right? When you're teaching this, it's really important to understand that, because we wouldn't have survived, just like all the Europeans that first came to this country would not have survived if it wasn't for the First Nations people that were here. So it's really important, I think, to do that. I'm not going to show you these, I'll go to them just to kind of point them out, but I'm not going to show you more videos. But there's a couple of places that I found that were, had some really good instructional videos. If you wanted to do any of this, you know, some Métis jigging with the kids, just some pretty simple, you know, steps and things like that. But so there's this one, which is really good, which is Mile Zero Dance Online. She does some really good stuff with the Red River Jig that's there. And then there's a cultural series on Indigenous music and dance. And this one in particular has, of course, now there's going to be a, sorry, it's probably Zoom usually on this account skips the ads because it's paid for by EarLZ, so hopefully it does skip it. But this is also a series too that has, yeah, there we go, it'll skip it. Perfect. So they have a really, it's from Surrey, actually from BC, which is really cool, but cultural video series as well. And you'll notice down the side, there's a whole bunch of things as well too on the Métis. So yeah, there's a bunch of things on there for you. I just wanted to, so this section I put in here, again, it was like the dance, right? So that people understand the dancing, the drumming, the singing, everything to do, particularly with First Nations, Inuit culture has a level of spirituality to it. You can't talk about activities that you're teaching the kids that have to do with these cultures and not explain that. I don't think you need to get in depth, obviously. It depends on the school that you're at and how you go about it and the age of the kids, right? What's appropriate. But I think you can explain a number of things to the children in this way, right? So Indigenous games, there's two different kinds. There's the games of chance and probability that you were great for math and things like that you'd play. But then there's these physical games, right? So the physical games of endurance and things like that. And in these games in particular, they're meant to teach a whole lot of different things about being a good person, just like everything about traditional Indigenous culture did. And so these are some things that this particular individual that did some research on this came up with to explain the healthy social values that are being taught within traditional games that I think are important. And a lot of things that we hold, in Western culture as well, but it's just on a whole other level in this situation. You're to honor those who gave you the most challenge. So instead of being angry with that person who, challenged you the most and gave you the most of a rough time on the other team, you're supposed to honor that person at the end of the game and go up to them and thank them for challenging you so that you could do better and you could learn better. You're supposed to obviously respect the rules, which we want them to do, but there's different rules and tools for different tribes. Respect your competitors. Obviously, we teach that. Have courage, intuition, persistence, and patience. So games are meant to teach those qualities in you. To be humble, even when winning. So, that idea that you get up and you scream, yeah, we did it, that, everybody wants to do that, obviously, but not to do that as much in front of the losing team to make them feel so poorly, right? You might later, obviously when you're having your party together, when you're not with those, if you're not with that particular team anymore, then you can, go a little bit crazy at that point. But in front of them, you would not do that to make them feel poorly for losing. Obviously help others to do the best that they can. So even the people on the other team, if there's something going on, you help them, you don't just ignore them. Like say somebody falls down and hurts themselves, obviously it would be best, regardless of what team they're on, to stop, even if you're in the middle of doing something that you could lose, to stop and help that person. It's more important to show your character and who you are than to be winning. So recognize how your environment contributes to the quality of your life and respect it. So that means leaving the land, because all these games were played outside, leaving the land the same as it was before you came there. So that was also really important. So you would pick a spot, obviously, that you're going to play a game where you're going to do the least amount of damage to the environment that you're in. And then you could get into just the general information about Indigenous games. So men and women traditionally play games separately, right? And there were good reasons for that in terms of respect. So a lot of the time people think a lot of these things are sexist, just like ceremony. For instance, in a sweat lodge, women sit separately from the men, go in a different way. Women, wear a skirt. They're supposed to, because, and they don't go in when they're on their moon time, things like that. And people think that's sexist, but it's not. It's because women are actually more powerful than men in a spiritual sense, because we bring other spirits into this world, the men do not. And so we can really disrupt things like ceremony and during games as well, men not wanting to obviously cause any problems with the women. And also from a spiritual sense, if you're to keep to your own coupling essentially, so not to be touching other men or women, that sort of thing, when you're doing activities. So there's also that part of it. So that was part of the reason too, to be respectful. So just let you guys know that, so it's not like a lot of people think there's or feminist issues in there, but it's not about that. Children obviously played modified versions of adult games, just like Western culture. But again, I said there's two types of games, right? So and within the games of skill, there's those ball games, the contest with strength and endurance, and target games are the main three areas. So if we look at those, so common games, and I try to include ones from all different cultures, but there's run and scream, make the stick jump, line tag, rattler, there's a bone game, double ball, newbies, sticks in the fist, stick game. There's the more common games are the animal muck or animal laughing game, 1 foot high kick. I've seen that one done too. Leg wrestle. A lot of the Inuit games we include, right? Because they've got some really awesome endurance games, particularly. Foot tag, back slapping race, the bone game again, 2 foot high kick, and back push. So what I've given you some links to as well. Let's see. So this is the playbook of Indigenous games in the classroom. And I really like this resource. It's got a lot of great material in here. What I do like too is it gives you some of that background too, like the cultural inclusive standards as well. And I'll show you. Yeah, so it does go over some of that modeling as well. So from a pedagogical point of view, you've got lots of good information in here. Talking about that place-based education, which is super important, right? Talking about intergenerational information, why it's important to do this. Talking about, if you're still looking for motive, why to include it. And then a lot of the games even that I've included for you in that main list, I've got something in the chat. Oh, thank you, Mac. Yeah, it's an amazing resource. It's, yeah, totally. It gives you, like I said, it got that pedagogical information plus the games. So I love it too. Yeah. And so it's got lots of information in here for you. And what I do love as well, it's got the age, it gives you the equipment. I do have a resource as well that shows you like what the traditional equipment was that used to play games and what you can use, from what's available here, obviously, because you're not going to use animal bones and things like that generally, but they've also got like, I love this Captain Signals that they used. And yeah, so there's all kinds of stuff. I'm not going to show the whole resource, so you don't need to see the whole thing, but you get the general idea. It does have pictures as well, so it gives you that background information. This one has a bit more of the same information because you'll see a lot of games are repetitive, but I figured if I give you enough background information, there's the moccasin game, which wasn't included in the others. But it gives you that, again, a bit more information. And I love this picture of this little boy playing a drum. I just love that one. It gives you a bit of that information. I like too that a lot of these have different ones for the different cultures depending where you're living and what you want to teach, or you can teach the kids. This is another really cool one. So this, I'm just going to make it bigger. This is a PDF, and I love it in concert with that other resource that I showed you first, because it does show you where people come from on this map. So that's really cool. And you could include this if you wanted to use nativeland.ca as well. So it's native-land.ca. And you could also show the kids where these areas are that people lived. But this is cool too, because you can almost, I think you could print these out as cards too if you wanted to. And then it gives you a bit more information too, right? So there's little things on the side, like this one says this game was a favorite of Blackfoot boys who played it to improve throwing accuracy, which was needed when they went to hunt small game. So it shows you why a lot of these games were played. They weren't simply, and that's a thing, they weren't simply done in each culture they were having fun for sure, but they were teaching kids and the adults were working on accuracy, just like a lot of things. Like if we, think of archery and things like that, well, obviously that was so you could hunt, right? So now we do archery for the fun of it, but initially that was to survive. And so when we think about some of these things, right? And so again, like line tag, we've got, okay, line tag, but why was that important? Running, chasing, and balancing. You need to be able to do those things. Why? Because you might be chased by an animal or another person, if you're being attacked, as often happened back then. So anyways, these are in here. I thought these were really cool. This is another one too. Like for instance, this is an example for the bone game to show you that 5 bones were used, but you could use large tongue depressors. But you could explain to the children that obviously this game was originally played with the actual animal bones, right? And yeah, I just like this one because it's got tons of really cool little bits in it too. This is the same one I just showed you. No, might be. Sorry, it isn't. No, it's a different one. Okay, so yeah, so this is the Aboriginal education, and this is, which school division is this? Oh yeah, so this isn't BC because it's Kamloops Thompson. So this, I'm not going to go through all the different things that are here, but there's a ton of stuff on here. Like they've got links to, and this is mainly elementary physical education, but they're on here. A lot of these can still be used for the older kids as well. I don't think that you can just say, well, if it's a game, if you're teaching a traditional game, you can definitely, for some of these, use the older kids as well, because they can appreciate it too. And I also like it because it includes all the different backgrounds as well, different Indigenous peoples. And then you've got examples of, for instance, Powwow Sweat is a really awesome series on using powwow dance moves to work out. And actually, if you have ever heard of Dallas Arcan, he is, and I don't know if he must do it on TikTok as well, because I've got him on Facebook and I got him on Instagram, but I know that he does a powwow workout. And he does them for 30 days at a time, every once in a while. And because he's a hoop dancer, and he uses a lot of powwow moves and dances and explains what they are, and then he does them for exercise. So that's also an option too, right? To show the kids, and you can fit it into their workouts. And then obviously Inuit games, because they've got amazing games. But I included the video, obviously not showing you the video on this because I don't have time for that. But just letting you know.
If your business needs to show up, this print can print it. Click on
Right. It's supposed to skip these on my Zoom, but I don't know why.
Windows.
I'm going to skip that then because I do not want to show you the advertisement. Oh yeah, Kaylee, yeah, Dallas is amazing. His son is amazing too. This is in the chat. Yeah, Dallas Arcan Jr. as well. I met him at Four Winds market last November here in Calgary, and yeah, it's almost a year ago, and he's amazing as well. He's a new dad too. So Dallas Senior is now a grandpapa too as well. A little baby girl. Really important too, anything to do with Indigenous learning is land-based learning activities, doing things outdoors, right? And obviously we have restraints, and the majority of these things did take place in the nicer, weather, because if you're living outside and you don't have external heater to go back to other than, the fire within a teepee or whichever kind of lodging you're living in, you're not going to spend too much time outside other than going out to do exactly what you need to do, and then get back inside most days. But I mean, there's days, especially having lived around, Calgary area as opposed to Manitoba. Manitoba, we had way more days where it's like -50 with a wind chill, where you're not going outside for a week or two. Then you go a little stir crazy, as opposed to here in Calgary, where, we've got Chinooks coming through, and like today it was a bit cooler, but it was still 4 degrees out when I walked my dog. So, I mean, compared to back home, it's way better. Oh, sorry. Go back. That page I want to show you. So just give you a little bit of that pedagogical background as well, because as a teacher, I always like to have that information too. And this is actually from an environmental educator with Alberta Parks and a classroom teacher. So I really like their background information as well. They quote Robin Wall Kimmerer, who did, wrote Braiding Sweetgrass and that information. And the quote from her is, "The land is the real teacher. All we need as students is mindfulness," right? So a lot of learning about the land really teaches you these things. So you can do these activities outside because Indigenous people did them outside. Teaches you gratitude and practicing reciprocity, right? You have to pay acknowledgement to the land when you're outside. So it'd be part of your practice if you're taking the kids out and doing these activities, aside from teaching them that spiritual background to Indigenous games and, the ways to honor each other and yourself, is to also teach them that there's always gratitude paid to the land. So, Mother Nature is always thanked, before a game. Even they would draw, usually, especially Cree, would smudge and would offer tobacco to the land as well, just to pay honor and respect. And then that way it sets the tone as well for the entire time you're outside and playing that game, that you're respectful and practicing gratitude. Obviously sharing the stories on the land, and there's stories that go along with a lot of the games and things that people play. And if you're able to get an elder or a knowledge keeper that knows any of that, that's a little bit more of a specific kind of knowledge. But if you can find any of them, they could share some of that with the kids too. You learn to observe and record. So really, another thing the kids can do when they're outside, that besides playing the games, if depending on where you're doing outside of your schoolyard, but they can start looking for things, around like medicines and what's there. So you could include that as well, depending on which grade level you're teaching. Obviously, there's time for individual reflection, right? So really talking about the land and connecting to it, that mindfulness practice, grounding yourself. There are studies that show that actually being in contact with trees, being in touch with the ground with your bare feet, is actually grounding and is good for you physically and emotionally as well, right? So it wasn't just the tree huggers. There's actual scientific evidence now that shows that's true. And then you can allow that land to teach and inspire. Talk to the kids about, why do you think this game was played in this area? What do you think people were doing? What were they thinking? How did this affect the games that they played? And like for instance, if they're going to survive, what are they surviving from? If there's bison roaming here, and how fast do you need to be able to catch up to them? Because there were some of the warriors that actually ran alongside the bison to try to pick out ones that they were going to take down, right, and then come back to people. And so like there's a lot of endurance there in survival. The Métis did that as well. So really for land-based activities and being outdoors, it's really important that these activities are intentional. And by that, I mean, all those things that I just went over, right? You're making sure that it's not, let's just go outside and do this. You know, you may notice if you do attend any activities for Indigenous peoples, it's always started with, you know, a circle, you know, pretty much if they get together as a group, start as a circle. Generally, there's a prayer, and if not, especially if it's Cree, there's a smudge, you know, and just to set that intention and to set the stage for, you know, that respect and always honoring who you are and what you're doing, right? So that being reflective and mindful all the time is really important. You know, you can focus on the wellness, and you can use a medicine wheel, you know, and that's related to outdoor activities, talking about the circle of life, how all things are related, how all things work together. You can talk about, you know, the directions on the medicine wheel. You can look at the animals it relates to, the four sacred medicines. There's so many things you can include there as well. You know, if you're able to, or it depends where you live and, you know, what your school's able to do and the ages of the kids, obviously, but you could go and look at a trap line with, you know, or with somebody who's trapping, fishing. Obviously, my grandpa was a fisherman, you know, so I learned all about that. Harvesting, you know, hunting, animal tracking. I homeschooled my kids when they were younger, and we used to go to Kananaskis with a group of people every winter and go animal tracking. I still have the book that we use. That's always fun. Medicine walks and nicer, you know, in the spring. Building fires is a great way to, you know, talk about a lot of different things and be outdoors. And then exploring activities, you know, led by elders and knowledge keepers. And there's also games, you know, that obviously can be played outside. It's really important. And then there's some programs here in Alberta. I don't have time to go through each one of them, but you know, there's a ones in the footsteps of a trapper's life at Métis Crossing, which I have yet to get to, and I really want to. But they have some really cool activities there, and they're all outside, learning about how Métis people lived, and you're doing that. And the Painted Warriors is a commercial one, but they've got you know, some great activities to do outside. I believe it's like they even do kayaking and canoeing and all kinds of hikes and things like that through that. And then this is taking it outside. I want to show you that one, the Edmonton Community Foundation, which is interesting, especially because I know, and people from all over the province attend, but you know, it's ERLC is kind of the focus, so Edmonton. But this was a new program that was started back in 2022. And is to bring Indigenous teachings and outdoor education together. So that's what I was saying, if you're doing an outdoor ed program in particular, because that does go hand in hand, obviously, with PE. But they were partnered with the Yellowhead Indigenous Education Foundation. And yeah, they've got some really cool activities. They've also got the Forest School Association in the United Kingdom has looked at the programs. They kind of looked at things that they did. Some forest schools, and I know we've got some outdoor forest schools here in Calgary as well, mostly for the young ones, but it's growing. And just, yeah, so these are great ways as well, you know, to remember that to bring about truth and reconciliation is really working in these areas to have students understand this, right? And then looking at Indigenous sports heroes is a really great way to kind of tie that in as well for kids, so they understand. I've got a few websites here. There's some overlap, obviously, but this is a digital book, which is really cool because you can go and click on any one of these, and it also does have a link for Indigenous games as well. But just you know, looking at some of these areas and these individuals, and you can click on them. Like if I go to hers. There's an actual, it'll go through a book on this one. So each one has a book. Okay. So that's there. So that's kind of cool. And this is the education experience part of the hub. So this is, I just showed you the Indigenous Sports Hero Book section, but then there's the Education Hub as well. And then there's the Hall of Fame. And so you can go into that. And then Indigenous sports heroes in the classroom. Available for every Canadian school, which is really cool. So it was a 7-year commitment that began in 2021, an International Day of the World's Indigenous People. So that was through UNDRIP. And yeah, so there's just this is growing as well. So they're going to keep adding things and including that on there. Something's doing good for you guys. So I'm going to end it there. I'm going to stop record. I'll do stop share first. Stop record. I usually do that first. Now I'm